Order. Order. I call the meeting of the hosts of Assembly Management Commission to order. Let's begin by having the members of the Management Commission introduce themselves. I will start, and then we will move clockwise around the table after me. My name is Danielle Barkos, Speaker of the House, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's, and Chair of the Management Commission.
Good morning. I'm John White, MLA for Glacier Plain Dominion.
Good morning. Marco McLeod, MLA Pictou West.
Good morning. Leah Martin, MLA for Cole Harbour.
Good morning. McGuire, Halifax Atlantic.
Ian Rankin, Timberley Prospect.
Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Lisa LaChance, Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
I would also like to acknowledge the presence of James Charlton, Chief Clerk of the House, and Gordon Hebb, Chief Legislative Counsel, and Karen Howard, Acting Director of Operations and Sorry. The first item on our agenda is an approval of the minutes of the last meeting of the Management Commission, which occurred on January 29th, 2025. The draft minutes were circulated in advance of today's meeting. Are there any questions, comments, or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, would someone move that the draft minutes of the meeting of the Management Commission on January 29th, 2025 be adopted? MLA McGuire.
I move that the minutes be adopted.
Okay. Do I see a seconder? Yeah, okay. Sorry, MLA LeBlanc. With all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. Approval of the 2024 annual report of the Audit Committee, which is the second item on the agenda for 2024. The report was approved by the Audit Committee on February 12th, 2025, and was circulated in advance of today's meeting. Are there any questions, comments on the report? Do we have someone that will move the 2024 annual report of the Audit Committee? Okay, MLA LaChance. Do we have a seconder? MLA McGuire. Would all those in favor please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The third item on the agenda is the approval of the annual report of the Management Commission for 2024. The draft report was circulated in advance of today's meeting. Are there any questions, comments on, or suggestion changes to the report? Seeing none, do we have a mover? Okay. MLA McLeod, do we have a seconder? MLA Martin. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The fourth item on the agenda is the consideration of a series of proposed amendments to the House of Assembly Management Commission regulations. There are four separate sets of amendments representing four distinct changes. We will deal with the proposed amendments one at a time. First one, A, remove identity of landlords from expense statements in regulations to claims and accommodation expenses in response to security assessments. I will ask the clerk to speak to the first proposed amendment, which is, I recognize the honorable, well, you are honorable. I recognize Chief Clerk.
Thank you. I'm happy to have my status elevated like that. So we've got four regulation amendments before us today. This is the only one that isn't in any way related to the report of the remuneration panel. This comes from a security issue that was identified to my office by the RCMP. And it relates to concerns about disclosing the landlords for outside members who have an apartment here in Halifax. That's ministers and other MLAs alike. The issue that they felt, it was identified initially to me, was that by identifying the landlord in the case of some members whose landlord perhaps only has one building, that would actually identify where they lived and would cause a security concern. The RCMP then, we had a discussion. They did a proper assessment and looked at a number of different cases, and they found that they were able to identify for a number of MLAs where they lived. They were concerned, given the high threat level for MLAs generally and the current environment that we're in, that this poses a bit of a problem. And the recommendation was to bring to this commission a proposed amendment to basically to redact that from the expense reports that are prepared under the regulations. It's by me. In practice, it's by Ms. Howard's office. And so it would be just for that one item. We usually include the identity of the vendor whenever there's an expense. For this item, we would simply redact the landlord to make sure that people can't tell where the MLAs are living. So,
Are there any questions or comments on the proposed amendments? Would someone move that the proposed amendments to the House of Assembly Management Commission regulations to move the identity of landlords from expenses statements in relation to claims for accommodation expenses be approved? So moved by MLA LaChance. Would someone second the motion? Seconded by MLA Martin. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The second would be the implement recommendations of remuneration panel to increase the monthly amount claimable by outside members for accommodation expenses. I will ask the clerk to speak on this matter. I recognize the clerk.
thank you, Chair. So this was one of the recommendations, non-binding recommendations of the remuneration panel. So of course it had a very specific mandate in relation to the amount of the MLA basic annual indemnity, as well as the additional salaries payable to the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Premier, Ministers with and without portfolio. However, it made a number of additional recommendations, and this was one of them. So this amount, the $14.99, hasn't changed in quite some time. Its specific recommendations were that the amount be increased to $2,100 and that it be made uniform for all members. As far as ministers who normally had a higher amount, that will sort of come via direction from Executive Council to us to make it uniform. The one change it does require is this change to the Management Commission regulations. So this will mean for non-ministers, it will be $2,100. As I say, the ministerial one will come via direction to us. That will make it all uniform. And as you can see in the text of the regulation, this regulation is to have effect on and after April 1st of 2025, as was recommended by the Remuneration Panel.
Are there any questions or comments on the proposed amendments? Seeing none, would someone move that the proposed amendments to the House of Assembly Management Commission regulations to increase the monthly amount claimable by outside members for accommodation expenses be approved? Moved by MLA McLeod. Is there a seconder? Seconded by MLA LeBlanc. Okay, so will all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. So the next item on our list is implement recommendations of remuneration panel to increase and make uniform the annual amount claimable for constituency expenses. I will ask the clerk to speak to this third proposal and set of amendments. I recognize the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So this is also implementing a recommendation of the Remuneration Panel. So it recommended that as you've said, that the amount for constituency office budgets be made uniform. So you'll see in the proposed amendments the repeal of Section 43A, which is the provision that allowed for slightly higher budgets for geographically larger ridings. And the amendments you see here for 43.3 and 43.6, they change the monthly amount to $6,375.50, which corresponds with the annual amount that was recommended by the management or by the Remuneration Panel. Our regulations express it as a monthly amount, which is why we're doing it in this way rather than annual amount, but it corresponds exactly with the recommendation. I note that the change to 43 sub 6, that's the amount that the members receive in the month after they cease to be a member. Previously, the idea was that they received the base amount and it didn't include any additional amount for franking and travel, but with the elimination of all of those provisions, we've just had it harmonized it with the regular monthly amount that everyone receives. The only other changes are to take out some references to Section 43A, the section that's being repealed, and these amendments have effect on and after April 1st, 2025, which was the date recommended for the change in the constituency office budgets to take place by the management or by the remuneration panel.
Are there any questions or comments on the proposed amendments? Would someone move that the proposed amendments of the House of Assembly Management Commission regulations to increase and make uniform the monthly amount claimable by members for constituents' expenses be approved? Moved by MLA Martin, seconded by MLA McLeod. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The fourth thing on our list is respond to recommendations of remuneration panel in relations to annual increases to monthly amount claimable by outside members for accommodation expenses and the annual amount claimable for constituency expenses. I will ask the clerk to speak to this fourth proposed issue. I recognize the clerk.
Thank you again, Chair. The Chair has framed this as a response rather than implementation. The management, or sorry, I keep confusing the Remuneration Panel and the Management Commission here, the two most important bodies that we're talking about here. The Remuneration Panel had recommended that the amounts for constituency office budgets and for the outside members' allowance be reviewed regularly by the Management Commission. We've been doing that for a long time. We know what the response is. That means that they never get adjusted properly. So my recommendation was that we instead restore the automatic nature of Section 52, which is the annual CPI increase for both those items and the other items that are set forth in the Management Commission regulations. This will ensure that the value of those amounts, whether they be for constituency office budgets or anything else, that they don't get eroded by inflation as they have been for the past 15 years. So specifically running through this, I've distributed a copy to all the members. The one that was originally distributed had a slight drafting change, although there's no change in the actual meaning in this one. So Section 1 takes out the requirement that the Commission approve the CPI increase. Instead, it will be automatic every year on April 1st. It removes a reference to core in relation to the CPI for Canada. There was some confusion about what that meant. We've always used the all items basket of CPI for the Canadian CPI, and the way this section works is it's the lower of the CPI for Nova Scotia and the CPI for Canada. So we've removed the reference to core. We've also changed it to refer to the calendar year. This was an issue for us before because the regulations define year to be fiscal year. And so it meant that we couldn't apply the change until well after April 1st because it was looking at the change from April 1 of the previous fiscal year to March 31st. So we're changing it. We're looking at what it was for the previous calendar year. We'll have those numbers and be able to implement them for April 1st. And the change I spoke to about between the draft that was circulated in the meeting request and what's before you here is just this part here at the very end, which provides that there's no increase in this fiscal year, so no increase on this April 1st. It was previously framed as no increase for the 2025-2026 fiscal year. We've changed it to no increase on April 1st, 2025. It's the same thing. It's just a drafting change because the provision is all about making a change on April 1st.
Are there any questions or comments on the proposed amendments? Seeing none, would someone move that the proposed amendments to the House of Assembly Management Commission regulations to make the annual increase of fixed amounts set out therein automatic and providing to make the increase equal to the increase in the Consumer Price Index for Nova Scotia or the increase in the Consumer Price Index for Canada for the previous calendar year, whichever is lower, and to provide that there is no increase on April 1st, 2025. Would somebody, MLA McGuire has moved it. Do I have a seconder? MLA Martin. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. So the fifth item on our list is reclassification of constituency assistants. The fifth item on the agenda is the reclassification of the assistants. I will ask the clerk to speak to this matter. I recognize the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So it was a recommendation of the remuneration panel that constituency assistants be undergo a position evaluation. So we looked at some options around this about possibly even directly reclassifying them ourselves. However, the proposal here is to follow what the remuneration panel recommended and effectively have the Management Commission request the Public Service Commission to do that position evaluation with an eye towards whether reclassification would be appropriate. So they would look at it and make a determination based on that. So that's our plan.
Are there any questions or comments? I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to know, in that process, is there any consultation with, MLAs, or is there any way to sort of have some input into that process of the review or the reclassification itself?
I recognize the clerk, Chief Clerk.
We can ask that. My expectation is now it's a PSC process, so we're not in control of it, but it's certainly a question that we can ask, and I can certainly say that there would be interest in MLAs in being consulted, but it's the PSC's process. It's not ours, unfortunately.
Any other comments or questions? Would someone move that the Public Service Commission be requested to conduct a position evaluation for constituency assistants to determine whether they are appropriately classified? Moved by MLA White. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by MLA Rankin. Would all those in favor please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The sixth item on the agenda is an overview of the next steps to be taken in relation to the remaining non-binding recommendations of the remuneration panel over which the Management Commission or the Speaker's Office has authority. I will ask the clerk to speak to this matter. Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So a number of the recommendations were binding. Some of the stuff is also dealt with in Bill 1, which is already before the House. And then we've dealt with a number of them here at the Management Commission. However, there are 3 items left that were referred to in the Remuneration Panel report that require further work. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an outline of how we see that proceeding. One was a recommendation regarding the adjustment of the transition allowance eligibility and the reduction for other income received. So this was a suggestion about allowing that to be payable out to age 65 when an MLA resigns or isn't reelected, but also making the amount of transition allowances clawed back for other income. The recommendation of the remuneration panel was that the Speaker's Office determine implementation. The real big question there is how do you deal with the clawback of other income? So that will require some consultation by Karen's office, Karen Howard's office, with similar offices throughout Canada. We do know, I believe the remuneration panel's report had looked at BC as a model that does this, so we would look to consult with them, bring it back to the Management Commission to see if that's acceptable to the Management Commission, and then we would basically have to request a legislative change that the government bring forward a change to the House of Assembly Act, because transition allowances are legislated in that act. So we can't make the change ourselves, but we could certainly evaluate it, make a request for a legislative change. That's kind of I think we're looking at kind of fall to spring timeline for something like that. It'll take a little time to sort out the administrative aspects of it. The next one is the remuneration panel recommended that we review the compensation receivable under sections 29 and 31 of the Management Commission regulations. So that's the pay for committee chairs and vice chairs, and also for House leaders, deputy House leaders, whips, and caucus chairs. That will require a jurisdictional scan across Canada. It's a little more complicated than it was for the salaries and indemnities reviewed by the remuneration panel. There are some jurisdictions that do not pay their government house leader. I see the government house leader give me a look, because they're always a minister and it's considered subsumed within their ministerial pay. There are other jurisdictions that don't pay the caucus chair. There are others that pay very handsomely. So we need to take a look at what everyone is doing to be able to come back with meaningful recommendations that take into account some of these differences. I think that's something we can do in the nearer term, and hopefully, I think we're looking at within, probably by the fall, hopefully being in a position to report back and have some proposed Management Commission regulation changes to address those issues and better align the amounts we pay with what's paid in other Canadian jurisdictions. Probably trying to use the average among certain provinces the same as what the remuneration panel did. Lastly, it was suggested by the panel that we review the expense of reimbursement process under the House of Assembly Management Commission regulations. That is a longer consultation in terms of looking at what other jurisdictions do. There'll be significant variance among the other provinces and possibly if we look at the House of Commons and the Senate too. So we expect that'll take more time. We're looking at it probably at least a year before we'd be in a position to come back with with a report for the Management Commission to look at and think about whether they want to change our process or change how we do things, whether any of that makes sense. So that's basically what kind of the next year's worth of work looks like for us to deal with these other matters.
So there is no vote on this. It was for information only, but if anyone has any comments or questions, I'd be more than happy to recognize them. All right, the 7th item on the agenda is a review of the financials from the third quarter of the 2024-2025 fiscal year. I will ask the Director of Operations and Administrations to speak to this matter. I recognize Mrs. Howard.
Hi. These were presented to the Audit Committee in February, and I would say that we're looking at about 75% at this point for December 31st. Due to the timing that they were presented, we were able to include our final forecast that was submitted in January. It's pretty typical for an election year. The bulk of the election expenses would have been captured in the forecast at this point. And yeah, it's pretty typical for an election year, I would say, at this point.
Do we have any questions or comments? No? Okay, so that's the end of agenda items, but I will ask if anyone has something they would like to add, and MLA LeBlanc has raised her hand, so I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to put a motion on the table. This is sort of in keeping with some of the changes we've made today already, and I'm asking for the consideration of the committee for this. So essentially, the cost of wages, office spaces, and goods are all increasing, as we all know. Funding needs to be increased for members of the Legislative Assembly to continue their serving their constituencies and more broadly their province. Therefore, I ask that the Legislative Council be directed to prepare an amendment to the regulations to increase the caucus funding amounts by 20% for the consideration of the Commission at its next meeting. So essentially, that's the motion, and the 20% is sort of, like debatable, obviously, but basically we're looking at, increasing amounts for constituency offices, for remuneration, and I think we would like to consider looking at the caucus office amounts as well. And so this motion simply directs Legislative Council to take a look and propose an amendment that could come back at a meeting in the future. I'm hoping that everyone will support it. Thank you.
I am going to look for a seconder before we move on to debate. Would anybody, MLA LaChance? Okay, seconds it. And MLA McGuire has his hand up for comment, or MLA McGuire?
Thanks for the motion. we'll take it and just kind of review it and consider it, and then maybe we can have some conversations via email with the clerk and everybody else, but we just want to take a look at it and maybe just figure out where other jurisdictions are at and what a good solid number is. But I think it's probably an appropriate motion. We just want to take a couple of, a little bit to review it and then get back to you, if that's okay. Yeah.
Are we looking to defer the motion till the next meeting?
Yeah, so, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so MLA
Yeah, so
McGuire.
if possible, don't want to vote no, don't want to vote yes on it. If we could just defer the motion till the next meeting so we can take some time to review it. And, everything else is kind of months, year away. So I think it's that we take some time, defer it, and then we'll get back to you on it. I think we can collectively work together on this stuff.
MLA LeBlanc, would you like to withdraw the motion and bring it to the next meeting, or would you like to, okay, MLA LeBlanc.
Well, I'll just say totally acceptable response and makes sense. But the motion is only to direct Ledge Council to bring an amendment. So, and that amendment could be debated and looked at and taken away. So either way, I'm happy to withdraw it for today and let's take it offline and bring it back next time.
Okay, so the motion is withdrawn, and that concludes our agenda for today. We now stand adjourned.